You know, I've already said it many a time before, but I think the stuff that I make, I want to focus on both financial and these social matters. Understandably, when making the sort of content that I do, you get a lot of different opinions, and some people have a tendency to say, well, why are you always so negative on things? And in my opinion, that's not how I see it. You know, in my view, there are certain good and bad things that are true, whether we want them to be or not. Whether we like that fact or not is a different factor, but it is still a truth. And whilst these videos might not have a far reach and might not get the sort of viewing figures that I'd like at this stage, my intention is it gets people thinking. But as I say, a huge one is it's like, oh, well, why are you being so negative? Why do you have such a bad opinion on this and that? And that's not the case. I think, like I say, there's certain things that are true whether we like that fact or not. By bringing some attention to that, the hope is we can at least have a think about it. And by thinking about things, especially the uncomfortable ones, right, we have the ability to change them and create that positive difference that we actually want to see. Whether it comes to, let's say, financial issues with society and stuff like that, it's a trend that I think we always see, right? People like to deal with these problems when they've already happened. And like I say, people call me negative for pointing it out. I think it's just stating facts, but the fact is, most people seem to have a very reactionary mindset versus someone to take action and prevent issues. Now, I don't really want to talk society-wide in this one, but I want to talk more about how that seems to affect most people's lives, because I think there is a set of consequences that do come with being reactionary versus proactive. Now, I do understand why people are like this. It takes a lot more difficulty to be the change that you want to see. Well, that's where the real benefits come from. Bringing this back to the point, let's get across this road, my point is most people, when it comes to doing stuff, they do the work only when they have to. And naturally, that's going to limit the results that they can ever achieve. As I say, I think it is something that is hardwired into people, because you're not going to want to do hard stuff if you don't have to. But then people fail to have the success that they want in their lives and projects, and they wonder why that is. Let's talk about it in this video and discuss how that seems to affect most people's lives. Well, I think what the failure to do the work looks like is quite obvious. I mean, you ever think about it, it's like, I'm going to do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week. It never gets done. And like I say, for most people, when there's not that dire need, they ain't going to do it. It doesn't make sense. But I think at a point, you have to sort of break that cycle. I mean, obviously, I live here in the UK, and as you can see from the images, I think it looks pretty alright. For most people, whilst life is not necessarily easy, there's a lot of financial worries. I can't say it's difficult, not really. Most people, I would say, live in a fairly privileged position. And what comes with that is, I suppose, a lack of desire or a lack of need to work hard on things. Now, in a recent upload, and I don't know when it'll be out in relation to this one, I spoke about this fact in a bit of detail. I spoke about the fact that for someone like myself who grew up relatively poor, the desire to achieve something is very much there. There's no real element of laziness, because if you fail, you're not getting an okay position. I know we're just talking about the element of money here, but what I am saying is this. There was a choice, I suppose, and the choice was one of two things. You can choose to either really remain at zero, or try and end up as a hero. And whilst in a way not having to make these difficult decisions about things, not having these problems, I suppose it is a benefit. But I can't act like it's something that comes without its slight drawbacks. As when we touch upon a topic like this one, like I say, certain people do have to make the difficult decisions. For the majority of people, that might not be something that they've ever really had to face, because like I say, whilst there are specific issues in, well, everyone's life, for some people, they're not that huge, they don't impact their quality of life that much, but for others, they are quite large. Now, bringing this back into the context of today's video, I'm talking about the fact that most people are very reactive to stuff. And a big consequence of that in the real world, stuff will never get done. And that's why most people's dreams never get realised. The thing is, every single day that we stay in complete comfort, every single day we fail to acknowledge even some of the more difficult things that we might not like to, we are not advancing in the way that we want to, that we need to, in the way that's beneficial to us. If we want to see the genuine change in our life, we have to make some of the difficult decisions now. And that's a quite difficult thing to go about doing because, like I say, the easy option and the natural option for most people is just going to be to not do it because things are generally fine. But as I've said before, when you're an adult, when you're in the real world, you are, in a way, in every single market, competing with people. Everyone. Everyone who's your age, everyone who wants what you want. And with such a competitive market, not everyone's going to achieve what they want. It's quite an unfortunate fact, but it is a fact nonetheless. You have the decision of which camp you want to be in. Now, I'm not saying that I view the world through a negative perspective, because I really don't think I do. I think I have an amazing life, I think I have an amazing day-to-day experience, I really enjoy the way that the world is. Of course there are certain problems, and I'm sure everybody can agree on that. So, I'm not saying that the world's perfect, but I'm not portraying a negative message either. What I'm trying to say though is, it's a skill. It's a skill that you need to gain if you want to have success in life. It's quite a challenging skill to accept because, again, it may take you outside of your comfort zone. It may take you outside of the bubble that you understand, that you know. It may give you some unfortunate and harsh truths about the real world, but they will eventually, and you will eventually, find a lot of truths based off of that. Of course, this can manifest itself in many different ways in life. And I don't necessarily know exactly what it is that you guys want to do with your life, but I find it to be a big issue that most people face as time goes on. They just do not do the work required that's going to get them to change. Now, let's tie this back into where I started the video, because I remember at the very beginning of this one, I said I want this channel to be about talking about not only the financial markets and the financial situation of the world, but also about social issues. The modern day seems to have people in an identity crisis. I've made a few videos speaking on this. A lot of people don't necessarily go with what they believe in, they go with what brands tell them to. They want this car because it makes them look a certain way, they want to wear these shoes because it shows that they're rich and stuff like that. But the fact is, the reason I think why a lot of people fall into this kind of sheep mentality is because they've not taken the time or they've not had the experience to kind of learn for themselves. They don't get the chance or they haven't taken the time to reflect on what they personally want. Now, I think it's another big harsh fact about adult life, but the truth is, no one's coming to help you with these goals, because most people haven't got the time or the insight themselves to even actualize their own goals and aims, so let alone can they help you with yours. But what I will say is this: when you grow up and accept that responsibility, that harsh fact, your life will improve immeasurably. The first step to solving any sort of problem is acknowledging that the problem is there. I don't know what that is, but like I said at the beginning, many people say I'm very critical. It's about being realistic. Again, it's not a negative thing, it's not really even a bad thing. But people only like to point to change, I think, to kind of bring this all back to the same topic. People only point to this change both socially, politically, and in their own lives when it really starts to impact them. But a lot of the time, when you're really starting to feel the bad impacts of things, is almost always too late. You know, in a few of the videos that I've touched on recently, we talk about a few political things, and how politicians kind of seem to work for themselves more than working for the people. But then again, who are the people that have voted these people in over years? Well, at some point you have to take some sort of blame. Now let's tie this into how it will help you in your own life, because this might sound like I'm going on a wider point here, but I think there are two faces to this, right? Part one is looking at how it impacts the world, both positively and negatively, because again, there are some facts that we have to admit whether we like them or not. So step one, in the real world, when we acknowledge them, we can become a lot more honest about what things are like. I think a lot of people walk about in this sort of dreamlike state where they think, or they seem to have this perception that a lot of things just happen. It's just how it is, and the only thing that they can do about it is complain. And I guess that ties back into the second part of this, because when we talk about this in life, in your life, in my life, in our lives, this is where we have, I would say, 100% control over this topic, because think about it. We can influence how our life looks, what our life looks like, and what we do over the years that we have. But yet again, I see not enough people really, and I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong, but I think there's not enough people who do this, as in think critically about things. And all that happens is, because they can't think about the bad things and the bad consequences of what happens if they do this or do not do that, which will actually help them to stop doing that, all they end up doing is they end up falling into the mould of somebody else's ideas, and eventually I think that's why a lot of people end up unhappy in 9 to 5s. I think it's why a lot of people end up overweight and all these sorts of things, because they can't take the time at some point earlier in the trip to acknowledge, hey, this is starting to fall out of line. Now I want to give an example of myself, right? As you guys will know by this point, I run quite a few businesses, the main one being the reselling business that I have on eBay. Now let's take that for example, right? How was I able to build this? It's just an example, but it's one that I think is kind of relevant. Well, obviously, I was able to build this by listing different items, but also by looking at which items work, which items did not, by looking at how sales data works, that sort of stuff, right? A lot of people wouldn't even be able to get to that stage, I don't think, anymore. Because it's like people just sit round and wait for something to happen. They wait for a solution, they wait for a problem to arise. But my way of thinking about it, relating this to what I said earlier about having the choice of being something new and interesting, or staying in the same old boring position, you get two choices, like, okay, if I carry on at this path, I'm not going to achieve anything monumentous, or big, or exciting. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm there yet, I think there is a long way to go, but what I'm saying is this, you have the choice. You can either accept that state of, I wouldn't necessarily say positivity, maybe even that state where things are not going to be as good as they can be, or you can try for the change. Now, this is how I think life becomes unstoppable and how you become unstoppable. There's one camp of people who will sit there and say, well, I'm just going to let things go along, I'm going to let things tide along and see how things go, and most of the time, like I say, all that's going to happen is they're going to get led into a certain mould that they may not even believe in, because they don't take the time to look at, okay, I'm not doing this properly, I'm not doing that properly, and all these sorts of things. I think there can become a point where you become overly critical, but I think it's a lie that we've been told right now, right? Because everything's so comfortable, we think that we don't need to be critical of certain things, when in actuality, it's in our best interest too. Whether it's things in the jobs market, things politically, whether it's things in our own lives that we've not taken a handle on. It's a lot of the time beneficial for us to think about the mistakes that we're making, because it's a big age-old fact, right? You can learn from your mistakes, but you can't learn from your mistakes, number one, if you're scared to make them, and number two, if you're unwilling to acknowledge the fact that you've made a mistake. I think it's a maturity thing. I think as you go on, part of, becoming a mature adult is part of realising, hey, not everything I do is perfect. And yes, that is a humbling thing to do, because you realise, okay, it means that I'm going to make mistakes, it means that I'm not going to know certain things, and all that sort of stuff. But you know what else it's going to mean? It's going to mean that you can be honest. You know what else it's going to mean? It's going to mean that now, the fact that you've actually acknowledged that you're not perfect, you have the room to make mistakes, and you'll be accepting of that. And if you can make mistakes, if you can be accepting of the fact that you've made mistakes, and you can hopefully learn from that, you can then grow in the future. I think the lack of critical thinking, the lack of ability to analyse people's own decisions, and also decisions wider in society, is what leads a lot of people to a lifestyle of unhappiness. They can't take the time to think about what things really mean for them, how they really feel about things, and things related to that. They can't do that, and that will only negatively affect them. This is one of these things where, yes, it does require some internal insight. It does require some looking deep inside at what you personally think, what you really believe, and all that sort of stuff. But once you've done it, once you have the ability to do it, and once you realise, no, it's not a negative view, right? Like I said at the beginning, I'm not negative. It's just as simple as this. I acknowledge that I can make mistakes, and I'm comfortable with that. Looking at it like that, what does it do? It gives you the ability to then learn from them. As I say, for a lot of people the opposite seems to be true, and they can't even admit their mistakes. I'm telling you guys, it might be a difficult thing, But if we want to see some change, both in our lives, in our situations, in the world, we need to have a think about whether we're actually doing anything to drive that. I hear a lot of people moaning about a lot of different things. Not everything's always happy, not everything's always perfect, not everything always goes the way that you want, but I think if you have the ability to think about that, think about how that makes you feel and what you can learn, you'll gain a lot of insight straight away. It'll teach you a lot about the mistakes that you're making, and it'll show you a lot of the mistakes that you're making that you may have not understood were wrong in the first place. The first step, like we just discussed, to fixing your mistakes is to acknowledge that you can make them. And when you make mistakes, when you fix mistakes, I should say, you're improving yourself. You're getting better on your journey in life. And that is where the real growth comes from. I think too many people nowadays are scared to let their true opinions be known. They're scared to take the deep plunge that's required to just enter the journey onto success. And what success looks like is not something that I want to say. I've got my opinion of it, but that's not the view, right? It's a very subjective thing. But if you've got a view on something, if there's something that you want to achieve, and you're not taking the time to think about what that is, and also, as uncomfortable as it is, like I say, think about why you might not be there, it's going to be very difficult for you to get there because you can't realise and notice the changes in your current lifestyle that you'd need to make to get yourself in that position. Maybe I'm wrong on this one. Maybe I'm completely out of my opinions. You know, it doesn't really make much sense to you guys. But I think this one kind of makes sense. I hope it does at least. I think when you're faced with the choice directly, when it's something you have to do, you are kind of out of options. For most people, that's not going to be the case. But it doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity for you to look inside for yourself. You need to sometimes have a think. Again, as uncomfortable as it might be, it will probably give you a deeper perception as to what you need to do to get into the position that you want. So no, just to conclude, I am not a negative person, or at least I don't think I am. What I think I am, though, is someone who can think with an open mind. And when you do genuinely think with an open mind, not everything that you're going to think is going to be nice, right? Not everything you're going to see, you're going to have a positive view on, and that is okay too. But acknowledging what you really feel, think, believe, see to be the case in the real world, that's going to do nothing but help you. So I think when you get real about the world, when you get real about yourself, when you get real about your achievements and realise why you're not there, you open the door, you start the conversation, and you start the journey towards potential success. So that's all I really have to say on this one. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. And again, do let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I love hearing from you guys, so if you have anything to drop down in that comment section, do let me know. But for this one, that is it. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.